Hey moms, it's Laura Ollinger. Welcome to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast. This episode is part 2 of my conversation with Heather Johnston, a psychotherapist.
Okay, so kind of transitioning over to, how helping, yourself is helping your family. Like, I think that that's a really big piece that I want to spend a little bit more time on. So, do you have any examples? I mean, obviously there's client confidentiality and HIPAA and all this stuff, but do you have any examples of something you could share? And it could be in a hypothetical sense, but loosely based off of a client where, they really were struggling and they came to you and they found something that they thought it was for themselves, but then it turned out to help the whole family.
Yeah, I think I'm just trying to think of a good example.
Mm-hmm.
There was a woman who had, I'd say, kind of high functioning depression and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So there's kind of like what they consider textbook to be diagnosable. Anxiety is you have to have an excessive amount of worry plus these 3 things over a 2-week period. Or depression is, you feel depressed for most days for 2 weeks or more, plus you have 3 of the 6 or whatever, have very specific outlines so they are diagnosable.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of high functioning depression and anxiety, and it's probably a misnomer, but where people look like they're okay.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were to talk to them, you'd have no idea. But
Mm-hmm.
there is that overwhelming sense of guilt and dread and just like flat affect or high functioning anxiety often comes across as perfectionism, overachieving.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have somebody who kind of was, I'd say she was more high functioning anxiety with this idea that everything had to be like perfect and everybody overachieve.
Mm-hmm.
And her desire to live that out in her life was really impacting her kids because her perfectionism was being projected that direction.
Mm.
And if you've kind of always lived with anxiety like that, you don't know a different life. Like you don't know a way that was before that.
Right.
So looking at and examining where does that perfectionism come from? What's driving that? What are the fears? What are the concerns? What are the emotions? And sort of working through that to get to a place of being able to have more self-acceptance and recognize that perfectionism isn't a way to actually control things and can exacerbate anxiety.
Yeah.
That spreads through the family, right? Because no longer are we worried about do we have the perfect outfits and are they doing the right things and are their friends the right friends and what are the shoes and somebody put a toy on the sofa and it has to be clean. Those things kind of spread out. And for the kids, I think it tends to be, it's really good modeling. And I think that's something that people don't always think about is like, just because something was going on and you worked on it and you kind of came to a different way of viewing a problem, viewing a situation, viewing yourself, you're modeling change for your kids. You're modeling that it's okay to say, you know what, I've learned something and I'm going to adapt. It's okay to be different than you were and to accept different things about yourself. And I think so much of what we do as parents is just straight up modeling for our kids. If here's kind of the example we had before of like somebody who's just like blah with life, whatever, a little bit more agitated, yelled about the soccer cleats, then to be able to go back to the child and say, I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
Like, in an age appropriate way, say, I was having a bad moment. You know how you get frustrated. I just kind of felt like that. It came out in a way that I didn't mean. I'm really sorry we had that interaction. That is so powerful. And I had one client at one point who didn't want to apologize to anyone because it's like a sign of weakness. And so you can see like once you accept maybe why you don't want to apologize and you see the benefits of apologizing, it can be transformative for your relationship with your kids.
Yes.
So those are just some examples. Is that kind of what you had in mind?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, anything that kind of just illustrates what, this really looks like and how this kind of process works for people. And it's so, like you're saying, it's so individualized, but it's just like kind of giving a general concept for it. And I completely agree with that repair process. That's something that I, teach my clients, but also that I feel I've done a pretty good job at as a mom in my family with my 4 kids. There was, it's so funny because I take all my own advice and I try to do the best I can. And again, not holding myself to any type of a perfectionist standard. I give myself grace, and I tell my kids, guys, I'm not perfect. I'm human. I mess up sometimes, because I'm generally like very, very self-regulated, and I kind of pride myself in that. And there's one day where I yelled, and my boys, they were like, Mom, you're yelling. And I'm like, I'm allowed to yell. I'm a mom. There's no laws against that. It's just like, I'm human, guys. I said, I'm sorry. I got frustrated. I got stressed out. I got upset, whatever it was that happened. And they were just like, oh, like it threw them off so much, because they're like, A, what's happening? But then B, that I did do that repair work. And they're like, oh, yeah, you're right. You are a human. You're not the superhero that we think you're supposed to be. So it's kind of funny how moms hold themselves to a certain standard, but then, they become, the kids become so used to whatever that might be, that then they expect that. And then when that doesn't happen, the kids are like, Mom, what's happening?
Yeah. In that example you gave, is you gave context to a situation. And kids have obviously different brains than we do. And sometimes I think people forget that kids are just like little people, and that you were that age once, and, and that they need context because they don't have your world experience. And so, and especially with, younger children, when there's an anger issue or somebody's frustrated, they kind of assume it's them, like it's my fault. And so being able to give context to children, to be able to say, hey, listen, this is what's going on. I was struggling. This is what I did. I'm sorry. Or, oh, I could have handled that better. Yeah. That gives your kids the ability to understand that it wasn't them, understand what's going on, so life doesn't seem so chaotic and scary. Like, Mom just yelled, I'm freaking out. Okay, wait, she's just having a bad day. Yeah. She's dropped something on her toe, and back the car into the garage, or whatever is going on, to give context to that experience so that they feel safer in what's going on. But it also teaches them how to express the same way. So context in your connection with your children is so important. And that's one of the things, like, even if you are struggling with a mental health issue that's maybe more severe than the blahs, but like you struggle with anxiety or depression, or you're going through something because, maybe Nana just passed away. Being able to provide in an age-appropriate way context for kids so they can understand what they're seeing from you, and knowing that they're safe because they get what's going on is really important.
Okay, so that leads us to like the perfect question is, if you are on the more severe side, on the more clinical side of anxiety or depression, what is okay to share with your kids, in your opinion? What would you say is not okay, and what is okay? Like, how do you frame that?
I would suggest that anything that really is an adult conversation, where it's an adult topic, you don't share with your kids. So what I envision is more age-appropriate sharing would be if you had a younger child and you really struggle with anxiety. So you were just, sometimes you're a little more agitated or frustrated, or have to keep repeating things, or kind of are ruminating on something. Sometimes you kind of zone out from your kids, whatever the case is, or have to take medicine, because for some people, medicine really helps. To be able to explain, like, hey, sometimes you have feelings like, sometimes I have similar feelings like that. And sometimes they get really overwhelming. And so I have to do some things to help myself. But I just want you to know that we're okay. But I just want you to understand where this is coming from. So you're not, like, you have bad days. I'm having a bad day. And that's okay. For older kids, kind of in the range where you work, adolescents, being more direct about, I'm really struggling with anxiety. For me, it shows up in, I have to check the stove 15 times before we leave. I have to kind of always know where you are to feel safe. And I know that can feel invasive to you. So maybe you and I can work on something together where I can feel okay, and you don't feel overwhelmed by me constantly contacting you, because it is kind of my issue, but I'd like to work together on that. That would be appropriate. Something you share with a partner, like, I'm afraid I'll never get over this. All the fears, all the stuff that, like, that is on the top of your mind that you just want to share with somebody. That would be more for a partner, kind of fears, scary things, etc. For your kids, it's more just factual based, of like, this is sort of what I'm going through. Just so you understand, there's context. And maybe even if we're at a friction point, because I have to know where you are, because it just, like, I start to panic if I don't know. But I know that you're a teenager and that you should be able to go out with your friends and not have to report back every 15 minutes. Like, how can we make that work for both of us? I think that's a fair conversation as well.
Yeah, I love that. It's really well said. Speaking of, that is, a lot of what I work with. My clients, we do work, because with my teenage clients, it's kind of like life skills, social skills, things like that, thinking skills. But with the adult clients I have, it is a lot of strategies like that. Like, how are we going to find something that works for both of you? And so that's why I did actually, bring a download for everybody to look at today. If they're interested, you just go to positivelyhealthy.com/stop worrying, because I feel like worrying is something that moms are notorious for. Like, we worry. Like, from the moment they're born, we're worrying. And so it's like, to stop worrying is just like the most peaceful feeling I've ever experienced. When I stopped worrying, I was like, whew, I can take a deep breath. I can breathe. And so, what is a way that you can help moms kind of like frame the worrying when it's like normal, just like, oh, I'm concerned about my child, versus, holy cow, I'm obsessively checking them on Life 360, or I'm, hyper vigilant about, a lot of moms, like, the worrying that I'm seeing is like the college applications, and they have the Excel spreadsheets, and did you apply this for this? And did you email this school? And did you get the scholarship for that one? And did you get your ACC scores and your SAT? Right. And it's like, oh, wow. Like, there's such a big thing that they're building up. And sometimes I'm like, wait, is this really about the college thing, or is this something else? So what do you say when you have a mom that's just like worrying like crazy?
I would say, first and foremost, it's entirely normal. We all do the best we have with what we do the best we can with what we have.
Right.
And if worry is something that's really natural to you, then it's not surprising that you want to check Life 360, or you desperately, anxiety, want to control something by overachieving with the Excel spreadsheets and this and this. And if we don't apply to 20 schools, what if you don't get in any schools? And like, generally, it's not the end of the world, I think. And that's something that is hard, because for moms, we're always told that if we don't really show up for our kids exactly right, it is the end of the world, and we'll have like some sort of serial killer as a child. That's not how it is. Kids are resilient, and they just want to be listened to and loved for who they are, the way they are, just like that's what we want for ourselves. Mm-hmm. So for a mom that worries a lot, like you talked about, I would ask them to take a beat and say, okay, my kid is signaling to me that this is a bit much. Because my guess is the mom who is doing all the college applications, that kid is just like, please, mom, stop. Yeah. Or I need to have ownership in this, or I don't care. Like, right. If you're going to do it all, I don't care. So you're probably getting some signals as well. Take a beat and ask yourself, why am I doing this? And what am I hoping to accomplish? And with those answers, think, is this the only way to accomplish that? Because I could imagine if you're on your kid all the time about college applications, and I'm not that far from that, so I get the worry and the concern. Yeah. Are you taking away something from your child's agency to do it themselves? One of the things as we raise children is we want to raise kids who can be autonomous in the world. Totally. And sometimes we over worry and we just, which is like such a thing. That I think, like you said, for all moms, worse for some other than others, is that we're taking away something from our child as well. We're taking away that autonomy, having them be able to see what they can do without all of the worry. Right. And sometimes natural consequences stink, and it's hard to sit back and watch. So I'm not saying don't do anything like, yeah, you apply, forget about it. Yeah. But maybe you sit down and have, like we talked about, a more reasoned discussion, like tell my son in this situation, hey, I'm really concerned that there's a lot of moving parts here, and I'm really concerned that we'll miss something important. And so I've been kind of stressed out about this, and that's my issue. I accept that. But what can we do so you can feel like you're doing what you need to do, but I still have the ability to kind of check in every once in a while and make sure nothing has slipped through the cracks.
I like that. Yeah.
So it's like, why am I so worried? I'm asking myself, well, what if he doesn't get anywhere? And there's so many parts. And what is another way to accomplish that? Okay, have that discussion. Take the deep breath and let your kid have some agency. That's hard. It is hard. I wish I could tell you I was perfect at it. There's sometimes like I go full around one way. I'm like, oh, and then I'm like, nope. I go all the way back. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. That was me. Yes. That's not you. And so this is for you to do. And I'm here to support you. And if you need help with anything or you want to brainstorm together, I'm here. But there's a lot of times where I have to go back and unparent the overparent that I did.
Kind of bring yourself back. Yeah. When you catch yourself.
I'm honest about it. I was like, that was my issue, my worry. That's not your worry. I get that.
Yeah.
My son, although, is very big on, Mom, you do you, I'll do me. And I'm like, I get that and I respect that, but I also still do need to have some parenting. Like, it's not done yet. So like, let's find a middle ground between. Let's just
you don't need to be my mom anymore. I got it.
Like, there's a middle ground. Like, I don't need to overparent, but I still do need to show up for you. And there are ways that I can show up for you that aren't controlling and aren't being done in a way to manage something that I'm having trouble emotionally managing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So. And I like what you said about how, to kind of, I would say like kind of get curious about like, where is this worry coming from inside of you? And a lot of times what I see is patterns, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, patterns being repeated from the past. Mm-hmm. So I'll give you the perfect example, I think, which is my parents growing up were, and to this day, are like obsessed with driving safety. Like highway driving, regular driving at night, any type of driving. It's like, don't fall asleep at the wheel, all this stuff. And so I have that in my head. And what I can feel even now is that programming from my past coming out as I'm teaching my daughter how to drive. And I'm sitting in the passenger seat and it is, I freak out. Let me tell you, I am the worst mom, parent, driver, teacher. I'm going to hire somebody because I can't do it. All I hear is my parents' words in my head. Like, we are going to die. We are going to get in a crash. We're going to something catastrophic. And I know where it comes from. I can hear my parents' voices in my head. So what do you say? Like, how do you help someone uncover that, like that stuff from their past?
I would first say, extend yourself some grace, because all we know is what we've been exposed to. Mm-hmm. And people look around at, like, for example, at elementary school pickup, right? You pick up your kid at the end of the day and there are all these moms standing around and everything looks so perfect. And you're like, am I the only one struggling?
Yeah.
And so, but you don't know what their lives are like. You only know what your lived experience is. So extend yourself some grace. Like, you only know what you were brought up with, what you were exposed to. And so it's okay to have these moments where you're like driven by your parents' like voice in your way, don't merge left too quick or whatever it is. But I would suggest that anytime you feel like a really strong emotion come over you for whatever reason, whether it's like it's just a pull, you're like, oh, this is really like the panic is there, or we have to do it this way or whatnot, that maybe that is coming from a pattern of what you lived. I see it a lot in people who have grown up, I'd say underprivileged and maybe in economic uncertainty. Mm-hmm. That fear, even when they have a lot of money, that scarcity fear is still there. Yeah. It's no longer something that's part of their lives, but that fear is ingrained, like you talked about. And so some of the decisions that are made with this panic, like, if we don't do this now, I'm going to lose it forever. You have it. Some people have a strong feeling about that. I'm like, where does that come from? And part of what therapy is good for is when you notice these things, whether you notice a pattern, you just notice a feeling and you can't figure it out, there's somebody there to help you, to listen, to work through it with you. And so you're not alone. You're not alone trying to figure it out. I liken it to, have you ever tried to, like, a friend's like, oh my gosh, I have to write a resume, or I have to write or I want to be on the PTO and I want to be elected, so I have to write a little bio about myself, whatever it is. And your friend's like, oh, what should I say? And you just rattle off just these beautiful lines of prose about their amazing skills. And then you sit down to write your own and you're like, what have I done? Who am I? Like, I don't know. Yeah. So a lot of times it's easier for somebody from the outside to see what you can't see about yourself, just like you did for your friend. And when you were stuck writing the resume for yourself, it's one of the benefits of therapy, is that there's somebody on the outside who can hear what you're saying, and then they hear the patterns, they see the patterns, and they can bring those forward. And those are a lot of the aha moments, which is like, oh, that's why I do that. Okay. Yeah. And then you make choices. Like, do I want to continue to do that? What do I do when that feeling comes up inside of me? What skills and tools can I use so that I can manage that in my day-to-day life?
I just thought of a kind of an odd question, but it seems fairly relevant, which is there ever such a thing as an over reliance on therapy where it becomes like somehow, because we said earlier, and I completely agree, there's no downside to therapy. But what happens if you go to therapy, you love it, but then it becomes your life, like you're obsessed, and then you're telling your husband, oh my God, my therapist said this, and my therapist said that, and my therapist said this, and right? It's like, at what point do you think it's like maybe overkill or too much? Does that ever like come up for you as far as with clients?
I would say, first, as a licensed mental health professional in Texas, anyone you see has an ethical obligation to not kind of treat you forever. Like you're there for an issue, and the end goal is to launch you back into your life. Okay. And there are people who have certain things that keep coming up, or certain things, and makes it, they have somebody for several years. But when I see clients that say, oh, well, you just said, I'm like, well, that was a thought, or I'm sharing what I'm hearing you say. And I try to kind of help the client realize, like, no, you have the autonomy in this situation. I'm not dictating your life. Mm-hmm. And so there are wonderful things that your therapist can bring to your life, and they can bring insights, and those are fun to share. Like, but if you find yourself not being able to make a decision without your therapist, that's when you realize that you're not using it for a healthy purpose. You're using it as a replacement for something else you were leaning on before. Yeah. You've replaced one codependency with another.
Okay, so that's the distinction I was looking for. I didn't even know quite how to ask the question, but that's kind of like, it's like I knew it, but I couldn't verbalize it. So thank you for clarifying that, because I'm proud to say I've been to therapy for, different things at different points. And I always found it incredibly helpful. And I would get so excited that I would want to tell who was ever around me, oh, my therapist told me this, my therapist realized that. And I kind of like get a little hyper about it and excited about it. And I was thinking, I did come to some closure, and I came to some conclusions, but I can imagine like what would happen if I just had never stopped and I just kept going forever. Like, when is the end, So that's something I think some people do wonder, they don't want to maybe get started because they're like, well, how do I know when I'm done, or what, how do you like kind of assess that?
And I would say, first, I think it's wonderful that you do share my therapist said and get excited, because what that does is it normalizes it. Well, when I've been in therapy myself as well, as you can imagine, and I enjoy at the appropriate time sharing things with people, because sometimes it encourages people to take steps they wouldn't otherwise, because they're like, oh wait, you've been to therapy? Okay. Like maybe that's okay then. Maybe it's not, like, maybe you don't have to be, at the far end of the extreme. So I do think there is a lot of value in you sharing your experience, just because it normalizes it for people, and it makes it so much more accessible for people. But you'd be surprised. You just sort of know when you come to the resolution of the issue, because you've examined it, you've unpacked it, you process the feelings associated with it. And if there's sort of lingering things that kind of keep coming up, you build skills and tools that you can use in your day-to-day life. And then one day you're like, I feel pretty good about that. Okay, I think I'm good. I've had clients do that and then come back 2 months later with a different issue and be like, okay, so this came up, and because the human experience is messy. And that is okay. And sometimes, like, one thing might be okay, but then something else comes up, and that is okay. And I think normalizing the sense of, like, it is okay that we're messy, and it is okay that there's not always certainty, and that doesn't have to be scary, is really important. But you just have I just watch my clients' faces, like they just kind of like have this moment like, okay, yeah, I'm good.
Oh, that's funny.
And then you sort of know. And then sometimes the client feels too guilty to break up with a therapist, so they'll like kind of pretend for a few more sessions. And you're like, it's okay if you go. I'm here for you, but I'm here for you. You're not here for me. Right. So, but that's the only time I've seen that. Like sometimes clients are a little bit like, I'm afraid to tell you I'm done, because I don't want to feel bad about that. I don't want to hurt your feelings. I'm like, this is what I'm here for. My end goal is that I never see you again, but in the most positive, loving, wonderful way.
Yes. To kind of send them free and like let them fly and do their thing. And that means you've done a good job. So, it's a really a compliment to you if they do, go on their way and they've said, I'm done here. This has been fantastic.
And you want people to feel like, hey, I've accomplished this myself because as me as a therapist, I'm just lucky enough to join your journey, but it is your journey. And so when you have these aha moments, these insights, these growths, these closures, these moving on and flying away, you've done that. And that's yours to really hold and think, I really worked hard for that.
Okay, so we are just a few minutes left. And so what would be, in our kind of closing moments together, is there anything specific that you would like moms to know? Because again, we have a range of moms that like little ones to older ones. But I feel like we all have this common bond. Like we all have this strength inside of us that a lot of us don't even realize is there. And I love to see kind of like people find that strength in themselves. And I feel like I feel like you've always been a strong person for as long as I've known you, but you're such a great example of like finding your passion and doing what you love. And so that is really like giving you a lot of strength. Like what else can you say in our last moments to like really encourage moms to do their thing?
I'm going to say something I said towards the beginning.
Okay.
Move yourself up the list. So many moms have a guilt, a sense of obligation, a sense of, I have to take care of everybody. If I don't do this, no one will. That kind of feeling that I think really holds people back from putting themselves as a priority in their own lives. And that doesn't mean you're like, I'm going on a cruise. See you later. Good luck, people. Yeah. But it means valuing who you are, what you are, and your mental health and your contributions. Move yourself up the list.
Yes, I think that's perfectly said. Okay, so how can people find you after today? Where can we send them?
So I'm like I said, I'm licensed in Texas, and I work at Illumination Psychotherapy, which is just www.illumination-psychotherapy.com. And you can find me there. If you're a Texas resident, then I can be of help to you. I have office here in Austin that's really convenient to Bee Cave, Westlake, but I also do telehealth for anywhere in Texas.
Oh, very good to know. Okay, that's a lot of times people don't know if that's an option. And I know that is something that actually does hold people back because they don't always have the time to drive to an office, drive home, if they can just do it from their car or their office or wherever they can have a chance. So, okay, that's fantastic. Is there any last things?
I would just say that sometimes people are a little worried about doing telehealth. It is actually, I've seen the same results in person in telehealth. It's the same quality, same commitment, same connection. So don't be afraid just because it's telehealth.
Okay, very cool. Well, very good, Heather. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me.
Your time today. And just to remind everybody, if you are a worrier, you can go to positivelyhealthy.com/stop worrying and get a free download there just to help you get some guidance with that.
Thank you for listening to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast, because there's no manual for the hardest job in the world. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends.